Hello friends, today I will introduce you to a cold initially not very suitable for comfortable life, Greenland, the largest island on Earth. Little affected by human activity territory attracts more and more tourists every year due to its beautiful nature and unique culture. But despite this, the island is still something unexplored for most people. In today's issue you will learn how an autonomous territory larger than Mexico gets by with only 150 kilometers of roads. Why local women prefer to have abortions rather than have children. Why did Donald Trump need Greenland? And how do people live on the largest island in the world? The island of Greenland is located in the northeast of North America, due to which it belongs to it geographically, but politically it belongs to Europe and in particular is under the authority of the Kingdom of Denmark and is its autonomous territory. In fact, Greenland has a large degree of independence and may at any time withdraw from the country. The island is washed by two oceans, the Atlantic and Arctic. Its area is 2,130,000 square kilometers, which is 49 times larger than Denmark without taking into account the autonomous regions. It is believed that the first inhabitants from Europe appeared on the island at the end of the 10th century. Although Arctic peoples had inhabited it even before the discovery of the island by the Scandinavians, the island was deserted by the time of the Vikings' exploration. According to the sagas, the first settlement founded by Europeans appeared thanks to Eric the Red in 986. Eric was born in Norway but was expelled from there for murder, so he and his family ended up in Iceland. He also did not live quietly in his new place. With his explosive temper, Eric killed two men, a neighbor who did not want to return a borrowed boat and a Viking who dared to kill his slave. For this, Eric was sentenced to 3 years in exile. Executing his sentence, the adventurous Viking sailed west with his family and reached the mysterious island. On the subject of why he named the island Greenland, which is how the word Greenland is translated, is still debated to this day. Some believe that it was just a trick to attract settlers, because after returning to Iceland, he actively agitated the locals to move to the new land. Another version says that in the time of Eric the Red, the climate in Greenland was milder and the coastal areas of the southwest of the island were indeed covered with dense herbaceous vegetation, but since the end of the 14th century, during the Little Ice Age, the climate on the island became sharply unstable. It was then that the number of Greenlandic Normans once brought in by Eric the Red began to gradually decline. It is believed that another ethnic group that appeared on the island a little later contributed to this, namely the Greenlandic Eskimos, or as it is more correct to call them Inuit, who were forced to travel south following herds of walrus and reindeer and engage in armed clashes with the Scandinavians who had settled there. It is not known with certainty why the Vikings disappeared. Scientists assume that they died out, unable to withstand the competition with the Eskimos, partly left Greenland and assimilated, but nevertheless, it was from that time Inuit began to dominate the island. It is they who are now called the indigenous inhabitants of Greenland. But how is it that the island now belongs to Denmark? The fact is that Greenland colony was an independent republic until 1261, when its population swore allegiance to the Norwegian king, and in 1380 Norway entered into a personal union with the Danish kingdom, creating grounds for Danish claims to the island in the future. But since the early 15th century about the colony, in fact, forgotten, and only in the 18th century Danish missionaries who came to Greenland hoping to find the descendants of former European settlers. Only the Eskimos, who now make up the majority of the population of the island, were found here. Greenland is a unique island. It is more than 80% covered by ice thickness, in some places up to 3 kilometers. The Greenland ice sheet is the second largest after the Antarctic ice sheet. No matter how you feel about the news about global warming, but you cannot deny the fact that the glaciers covering the planet are melting, and the Greenland ice is also melting. It is believed that if the ice cover of the island will disappear completely, according to scientists' calculations it will take thousands of years, then the level of the ocean will rise by about 7 meters, which will have serious consequences. Also, with this outcome, we would see the longest canyon on Earth. Its discovery was reported in Science magazine back in August 2013 by Canadian and European scientists. The length of the large canyon under the Greenland ice is almost 750 kilometers, almost twice the length of the Grand Canyon in the United States. The climate on the island is Arctic and subarctic, and settlements are concentrated mostly along the southwest coast. Nuuk, Greenland's capital, is also located there. Due to the proximity of Baffin Bay and the warm currents, the temperature difference in the city is relatively small. The average temperature in July is plus 6.5 degrees Celsius, January about minus 9 degrees Celsius. But in the most part of Greenland is very cold place and the coldest in the center of the island, where in winter the temperature often drops to minus 60 degrees Celsius, and in the summer the thermometer does not rise above minus 10 degrees. But how do people live in such an amazing place? Now up to 88% of the population of the island are Greenlandic Eskimos. The rest are mostly Danes and other Europeans. Greenland is one of the most sparsely populated areas in the world. The population density is only 3/100 of a person per square kilometer. With the benefits of civilization, indigenous population became familiar in 1941 when the island was occupied by U.S. soldiers. Thanks to them, the natives had an ample choice of canned goods, chocolate, chewing gum, and other pleasures of life. Despite the fact that Greenland began to be imported products from the mainland, the rest of the goods pulled up much later. For example, television was not introduced until the 1970s, but in fact, the islanders were forced to watch Danish programs with a delay of several months as they had to wait for the tapes of the programs to arrive. There is nothing like clans or tribes in Greenland, but there are respectable and prominent families. As for religions, 98% of the Eskimos are Lutheran, and the local population speaks mostly Greenlandic Eskimo. Danish is also well spoken. The island's largest town, Nuuk, is 240 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle, with a population of about 17,000. At the same time, in all of Greenland lives only 56,000 islanders. There are cafes and restaurants, shopping centers, several supermarkets, and hotels in Nuuk. The main branch of the economy of Nuuk, fishing and hunting. Crab and halibut fishing is especially popular. At the same time, in the capital of Greenland concentrated most of the industry and autonomy companies. Also in recent years, the tourism industry is well developed. People are attracted by the huge glaciers, the opportunity to see whales, live in an incredible place, and admire the northern lights. At the same time, Greenland is deeply subsidized region. Denmark allocates about 600 million euros annually for its maintenance. The image of Nuuk is still not familiar to our eyes. Older neighborhoods with traditional single-family homes are bordered by block buildings from the 70s, and there are also relatively new buildings. But it is the old town where the buildings do not look alike but at the same time fit together that looks especially nice. The special architecture catches the eye in the town of Opera-Nuvik, located in northwest Greenland, and nature adds to the uniqueness of the settlements. But back to Nuuk, the town has almost no problems with food supplies thanks to its international port. The stores have a lot to choose from, but the prices bite. They are 30% higher than in Denmark. For example, A dozen eggs costs more than 350 rubles, and the average salary of natives is not particularly high by Danish standards. Most unskilled workers get about 15,000 kronor, which is about $2,500. It is difficult to live on this money, especially for a family on the island. In Greenland, there are no roads or railroad connections between settlements. The lack of road networks is due to the peculiarities of topography and climate, as well as the remoteness of settlements from each other. In total, there are about 150 kilometers of roads on the island. They are usually within the same settlement and surroundings, and to get from point A to point B will have to use a plane or a boat if it is summer outside. Another popular option for intercity communication is snowmobiles and of course dog sledding. In remote areas of the autonomy, the situation with products is worse than in Nuuk, and local Eskimos are more hopeful about what they catch in the sea. An unusual feature of Greenland, which tourists can't boast, there are more abortions here than births. Local women are calm about artificial termination of pregnancy. On average, there are about 30 abortions per 1,000 women of childbearing age. For comparison, in Denmark the figure is about 12, in Russia now about 16, but we have regions where the figure is close to Greenland, this Republic of Tuva and the Sakhalin region. The reason for this is economic problems, poor housing conditions and lack of education, but it is not just a lack of knowledge. Greenlanders drink a lot, and excessive alcohol consumption often leads to unplanned pregnancies. Sexual abuse is also a problem. Often a woman does not want to give birth, either because she has been raped or because she does not want to bring a child into an abusive family. In Greenland, people hardly come into the world. For many years, there has been a large number of suicides in Greenland. It even went so far that the island ranked first in the world for this indicator, 82 suicides per 100,000 people. Russia, for example, is in fourth place in this list with 26 suicides per 100,000 people. It is no exaggeration to say that every Greenlander knew at least one person who committed suicide. The high suicide rate is a consequence of something that happened back in the middle of the 20th century. The Danes began to supply the island with money and technology. Of course, there were those who got rich from it. At the same time, the traditional Inuit economy of small villages based on collective hunting, meat and hides trade was undermined and small settlements began to disappear. Their inhabitants moved to the cities, where many also stopped to alcohol quickly, and modernization had many negative consequences. The Inuit lost their identity, and their culture became demonized and eroded. This especially affected young people whose grandfathers and fathers had hunted, and they themselves had to learn to be urban dwellers without help or support, almost entirely blindly. Despite Greenland's abundance of problems, in mid-August 2019, Donald Trump announced his desire to purchase the island. Not that the Danish authorities took his offer seriously, but just in case, they rushed to reject it and further criticize it. Trump's idea may seem absurd only at first glance. Greenland is rich in natural resources, among which are rare earth metals necessary for the production of electronics. Now they are mainly supplied to the world market by China. If Denmark did give up the island, Washington would be less dependent on Beijing, but before it firmly stated that Greenland is not for sale and will not be sold. Life in Greenland is objectively not a sugar daddy, as evidenced by the frequency of suicides and the large number of abortions. Apparently, living among the glaciers and wildlife is not as romantic as it may seem to visiting tourists. However, people are in no hurry to immigrate en masse from the cold and ice-covered island. And this once again shows that man is a creature who can adapt even to the most difficult conditions. That's all, friends. If you like this video, share it in social networks. It helps us in development. And do not forget to rate the video and write a comment, as well as subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.